If you don't initiate sustainability into your competitive strategy, your business model, your business is not sustainable.
It's no longer an option to do things correctly. You have to do things correctly because number one, the consumers expect it. And number two, we all have a part to play in trying to mitigate it at this point. This whole issue with Russian goods has really heightened the need to be vigilant about your supply chain, because it's not just about, oh, well, I want to slap a sticker on things that says not conflict free or fair mind. It's about, you can't have these goods.
Talk about how we got involved in this type of thing, because I think people often see stuff and say like, wow, I'd love to help, but like how, you know what I mean? This client of mine for the past, hailing companies for the past few years, Futura Fine Jewelry, who does.
Yeah, I spoke with the owner.
Yeah, Bob Donofrio, what a great guy. So I started getting more involved with it at that point because I got this education about, mercury in particular, because that was fairly ecological gold. And so how that led to this was Bob? No, it wasn't even Bob. It was Ted Duddick from Riva. I was having a meeting with Ted Duddick from Riva in New York. This was at the beginning of the year. And he said, I'll start the meeting right after I finish this podcast with one of the members of the Fairmined team. And so I was watching it and I was like, wow, and just, I was downstairs in the lobby of his building watching it. And then I went upstairs and on it, I commented, look, like, I just always have this feeling like I don't know if you have this in life, in the world, I have this, like, I should be able to do something. I should be able to do more, I should be able to, like, I don't know. So I just sent a note to the gal and said, I'd love to talk to you. And we'd been like pinging back and forth, but never talked. And so we set up a call. And on that call, I was like, so tell me what I can do and how I can help. It was goalless, other than like to educate myself and say, I'm not a designer and I'm not a manufacturer. And so what can I do? And during that call, she said, we wanted to have this call with you because we wanted you to judge this competition, be one of the panel. And I was like, yes, immediately. Yes. There's actually something I can do.
Right.
There's like often that, feeling of like, if you can show me what I can do, I'm there,
Yeah.
So I thought I'd ask you, like, how did you end up doing this and where did it, because I think it probably went back further with you, because that's my guess, but let me ask you that question.
Well, that's a good question. So we do a lot of reporting, and kind of like collectively, I think Brecken does maybe the bulk of the reporting on kind of like all issues surrounding ethical sourcing, whether it's colored stones, I do diamonds, she tends to do stories on metals. And then I was also, for a time, though I'm not anymore, on the board of mercury-free mining, which was the same for me. Like, and I also interviewed Bob with Futura. Thank you for the connection. And got a real education on mercury and mining and how it affects everything. And I feel like the sense of responsibility expands for me in two ways. Like, number one, I think when you work in jewelry, sometimes I get this sense of like guilt that this is going to sound strange, but here I am all day, like, oh, writing about this $50,000 necklace. Oh, look at this $7,000 ring. Like, just things that are like so out of reach for so many people. And there's so many people that like don't have the basics. So sometimes I feel a little bad, like I'm operating in this elite circle and it's not really helping people. But then you have to remember there's all kind of people along the value chain. It's an industry like any other industry, and everyone is involved in producing the goods that come to market on some level. So you have to try to do good in the industry where you can. It kind of helps me balance that feeling of like, I can't believe I work in the industry that's so like luxury and elite, and it doesn't always feel great. And I'm just being honest when I say that. I don't know if anyone else ever like feels this way, but sometimes I'm just like, what are you writing about? Like all the problems in the world, and you're tweeting about a $56 million diamond. Like this is the problem in the world. But that's kind of aside. So then I learned about everybody obviously in the mining supply chain, and, you want to help people at all points along the supply chain. So that's number one, like helping people, but then also, I'm also constantly concerned about the environment. I've been watching a lot of shows recently. Ever since Earth Day, I feel like I've been watching tons of nature shows, and you hear about this species disappearing, and this ecosystem disappearing. And, this ecosystem, this forest disappearing is affecting this animal, which is affecting, everything's connected. So I feel like that's the other thing, that it's not just a people problem, it's an environment problem. That's something else that I'm always concerned about. Like, I'm always concerned about, how much trash am I throwing out? Can I recycle? Can I compost? Can I grow? Like, I have a roof on the garden. I'm trying to, not that this is any kind of scale, but like grow some of my own food, so I'm not constantly leaning on the supply chain. And not that that's like, not that I'm growing enough food to feed the army, but it's little things, right? So I think that's kind of where my interest lies, in both the interest of making sure, everybody's got a right to live, right? Like, making sure everybody along the supply chain has as good a life as possible, and also like trying to mitigate environmental damage. There was one article I wrote specifically, and they reached out to me after I ran this article and said, "Oh, we think you'd be a perfect judge for this. Thank you so much for covering it." Maybe we just covered the launch when they announced the project, and National Jeweler put something on it. And like, I put all articles that I think are important on LinkedIn, and I try to share them and tag people and get it circulating.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is the new Facebook, by the way. I find that LinkedIn to be way more enriching. But anyway, after I put that article up there, like, "Oh, we love all the coverage National Jeweler does on issues of responsible sourcing. Would you like to be a judge?" And that's, I think, was after we covered the initial launch of the contest that they reached out.
Got it. But don't you get approached about, I mean, you're Michelle Graff, for God's sakes. And I know you won't appreciate that the way all of us do, but like, you're the editor in chief. This is the biggest magazine. So like, don't you get approached about this stuff all the time? And how do you go like, I can't do everything. You can't do everything.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to harness the power of no.
Got
And
it.
I think that's something I wish as a young woman I'd known earlier, but I think all women identify with this, like the people pleasing, and you always wanting to, "Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it." And then you just get to yourself in the corner where you're not doing things as well as you could because you have too many things to do, and you're resentful and overworked and burnout. So I've learned to become very selective about what I do. And there are things I get approached to, like I'd like to do, but I don't, I'd like to do everything, but you just don't have time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but for me, this felt important. Like, anything I can do with improving the lives of the people along the supply chain or having a positive effect on the environment, I'd like to get behind. I also just think it was a really interesting challenge. I like the way that I think it was an interesting way to call attention to the cause. I thought it was a creative way. And
Mhm.
that's another thing too. I like to participate things that I feel like are well thought out and set up. You don't want to go into something and feel like it's disorganized and they don't really have a clear idea of a clear goal or a clear structure of organization.
Mhm.
So I'm a
Mhm.
Virgo. I can't do that. Can't
No,
handle it.
I totally agree with you about the structure and well, first of all, the gals, and I've only dealt with gals so far. They are like on the front foot. Like when I rocked up to the phone call with them, I was like, "I'm so excited to chat with you guys." And they're like, "Here's the agenda. Here's what we want to make sure we answer all your questions. And here's how we'd love you to participate with us." That makes you feel like, okay, I can solidly, be proud and be aligned with something like this. And what I loved about it so much was that it wasn't like, scrap everything, do everything with just Fairmont, scrap it all, start over, that this real appreciation of progress over perfection, and
Yeah.
two pieces, that's enough, just start and see what the experience is like and be curious. And I liked that the barrier to participation was really low enough for many, many people to get behind.
Yeah, I like that too. And I know I really, what is that quote? "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good." Like,
Yes.
so don't let like everything has to be perfect to, like, just take one step forward, try, put a little in there. put more, do more, see how it goes, and like keep improving. And I agree. And I feel like you're right. Accessibility is a big thing too. It's very democratic, and it's, we're putting the word out too on social media where like everybody can see it. It's
Yeah.
not some secret club. I feel like that's part of the thing with the jewelry industry too. Like for years, I felt like it felt to a lot of people like some secret club that the doors to which the doors were locked
Yeah.
and they didn't have the key and they didn't know how to get in. And it's nice to see it being democratized to an extent.
Hmm. And I think, look, when I saw that you were one of the panel of judges, I was like, ooh, smart. Because you just said it a minute ago, that LinkedIn is the new Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And like during lockdown, I was saying to people, LinkedIn is the new trade show, and it's open 24/7 and everybody's on there. You know what I mean? Like, so I know how active you are on there because I follow you religiously.
Well, I follow you.
and so I was like, oh, that signal to noise is going to be, I mean, because we can all bang a drum, but it's really about how much noise you get out of the drum, right? And like in my tiny way, a couple of weeks ago, I passed 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, right? And I was at the AGS conclave a few weeks back, and I was at a Gem Legacy presentation with Monica Stevenson and Melissa Quick and Brecken Farnworth from Parlay Jewelry Designs. And
The other Brecken as we know her.
the other Brecken, and she said the same thing. She said the same thing. There's another Brecken in National Jewelry. And she was talking about like how they had some wonderful year and they wanted to invest in a charity. They wanted to be, they wanted to give back on some way, just like what you were talking about, looking along the supply chain and how you could affect any sort of change. The long story short is they did like a post, maybe I'm oversimplifying this, on social media, and, $25 a day pays for breakfast and lunch for a kid for a year. They fed hundreds of children, like what, and I was like, wow. And I was like, oh, I have followers now. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe there's a value, because like I was always saying, saying to you, like you and I, we don't make jewelry, we don't buy jewelry, we don't sell jewelry.
Right.
But we have some signal to noise,
Yeah.
that, could be valuable.
I mean, the words we use in mercury-free are effective and scalable, and something we could give to artisanal miners that allows them to do their jobs without mercury, because it's better for them and it's better for the environment. Mercury gets into the water, mercury gets into the soil. It has an impact on everyone.
Hi, Elle Hill here. Do you want to learn how to get on the phone with any buyer that you want to work with without an introduction or a referral? Click to get the downloadable that we've made for you that you can start using right away and will be really useful for your business and growing your revenue.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like I don't control the supply chain. I can't change what supply chains people use or what gold they use or anything like that. I can tell you what's happening, but I think you're right. That's the biggest power that we hold is the, thousands of people we send a daily newsletter out to each day. And I don't know if it's thousands, I won't credit myself that much, but the at least hundreds I reached on LinkedIn, which is like truly, I agree. You're right. And it was, although I think we're getting back in person now, I think it's interesting that you called it the new trade show, because it really was where a lot of the conversation was happening in 2020. Was 2020? Yeah, 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
Time is so strange. It all seems so long ago now, but we're still in it. And it also feels like yesterday, all at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. And I also think the world turned upside down, but some things stayed the same, like that desire to not just benefit from our industry, but also make sure that everybody up and down the supply chain benefits on some level.
I mean, I think if anything, the pandemic and then the long overdue racial awakening in the United States just added to that sense of like social justice and like wanting to be fair and be equity and make sure everybody is involved and everybody's benefiting. That the pandemic, because the pandemic very much laid bare like the inequities in society that have always been there but are easy to ignore, right? But the pandemic really laid that bare, like who was surviving, who was dying, and what was the difference there. And So I think that I think that, De Beers put out this report. It was a while ago. It's probably, again, I'm bad with time right now, probably 2021. And the headline I got out of it, the headline I wrote for my story was, we're at the sustainability tipping point. It's no longer an option to do things correctly. You have to do things correctly because, number one, the consumers expect it. And number two, we all have a part to play in trying to, we're not going to stop or reverse climate change, but trying to mitigate it at this point. And everybody needs to get on board with that. And I don't, you can miss me with your political thoughts about, oh, it's not happening, it's not a problem. I don't care, it's happening. And everybody needs to be part of the solution. I don't understand it either as a political issue, because doesn't everyone want to live in like a cleaner, greener world where all species are thriving? Like, why is that even a political thing? I know. And I
agree with you completely. I have a question for you though. I attended the SFA Oxford Platinum Lecture Series last Friday. I've never attended this before. I'm getting my arms around metals and, how they fit into, the jewelry industry specifically, because obviously they have so many applications, and the ESG around it all. And there was this fabulous professor whose name I will try to remember later, who was a professor of geographical studies around Russia, right? And so his particular talk was on, the impact of the war that has been illegally waged over there and how it is, impacting the rest of the planet, right? In so many different ways. But it was really focused on what's actually going on over there, why it's going on over there. And it was a disheartening, bleak talk, as you can imagine, which was saying, no amount of sanctions, the data they had over decades of, what the Russian people who only have access to certain information are, understand they will need to accept in terms of sanctions in order to achieve the noble cause that the government is going after, is very high, and they're ready for that. So his prognosis, his summary was kind of like, no amount of sanctions will change anything because everybody's willing to accept anything, and there will be no mitigation or reduction in the effort to achieve these goals of reunification, or however you want to talk about what Putin's goals are. And in the end, he said, due to this, the pressures and the march that has really taken some good speed towards sustainability and ESG is going to become very less and less important, because we're dealing with, thousands of people dying, So in addition to all the bad news that he gave, he was like, and so sustainability, environmental responsibility, all that's not going to really matter that much, or it's going to matter less because we're now going into the second Cold War. And I was like, I didn't let the tears fall, but I was like, my God, one frigging upside of COVID was this feeling of everybody coming together and saying, we're all in it together, and we all have to, move more in the direction of saving this planet and each other. And there was this positive upside that I don't know if you felt this, and I'll shut up and let you talk to all this stuff I just threw at you, but it just made me feel like, no, because we all just started going in the right direction. We all just started understanding that if you don't initiate sustainability into your competitive strategy and your business model, your business is not sustainable. What do you think of all that?
But so somebody made Paul Ziminsky, I don't know if you follow him, but he's an analyst. He's fantastic. You should follow him on all the things, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. He's just a super smart guy. I had a really long conversation with him for an article I wrote at the very beginning of the Ukraine crisis, right after the February 24th invasion. Right. And he talked about kind of the downside for Russian companies, if I'm allowed to say for a minute, is he's like, not just Alrosa, the diamond company that we all dealt with for years, but so many of the Russian companies took years and millions of dollars to make themselves more Western, to make these, even though there's not transparency in the Russian government, obviously there's a lot of issues there. they spent a lot of money and time to make themselves more Western and to build these transparent businesses. And look at Alrosa. Now, you could argue that it was never good to be taking diamonds from Alrosa because they were always owned by the Russian government. But it's also fair to say that Alrosa was an outstanding corporate citizen in the diamond world. They were on all the boards. They were doing the things, the nanochips for tracing the diamonds, moving reindeer around. They were moving reindeer flocks around and understanding where they migrated. So if they built a mine somewhere, they didn't interfere with their migration patterns. Like, they were doing all the things again. And it was literally over almost overnight. Like, this one move by Putin, like, wrecked all these years, all these Russian companies spent making themselves viable business partners for the West. So that's kind of one interesting element.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting what he says about we're now going to another Cold War. I was talking about to someone else last week that was talking about we might, I mean, as far as the diamond industry concerns, we might come out of this with two different diamond industries. You'll have Russian goods, which will sell to certain countries once they kind of figure a way around the banking, because that's really what the thing is now, the banking regulations. But they've got to, at some point, they're going to have to figure out a way to sell goods. I think that they're just kind of sitting on them now. Gochran's buying them, the state repository. So they're going to have to figure out a way to move goods, and perhaps they'll be moving goods to countries that are more sympathetic to Russia. So you have kind of like, right, just like not necessarily like the Cold War. I think of it more like Axis versus Allies, like World War II. Like, you have these kind of three countries banded together, and you have like kind of these countries banded together. And is this going to create two different diamond industries, that these goods from Russia go to these countries, and then the United States, which is still the world's largest market for diamonds, and other kind of Western European countries, et cetera, Canada, take these goods? So I think that's something else interesting to talk about. I guess I don't really follow his point, though, as to why another Cold War means the end of people's interest in responsible sourcing. Because from my view, the US retailers are very interested in responsible sourcing. And whether that's because their customers want it, they think it's the right thing to do, or they now recognize that they're going to be in trouble if they're caught sourcing Russian goods, or some combination thereof. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I think that that a Cold War is going to mean the end of people in jewelry, at least, being interested in responsible sourcing. I think this, for the diamond and jewelry industry anyway, this whole issue with Russian goods has really heightened the need to be vigilant about your supply chain, because it's not just about, oh, well, I want to slap a sticker on things that says not conflict free or fair mind. It's about, you can't have these goods. And you don't want to get mixed up in this very potentially expensive legal web if you're, not sourcing things properly, at least not trying to do due diligence on your supply chain.
Right. And I think it's interesting because our conversation just now went over to diamonds in particular.
Yes.
Because
sorry.
Well, Russian. No. But it's a really it's one of the points that I wanted to ask you about, because we're focused on that. Trees are launched, and they're like serene, and then the diamonds of origin. But the metal attention hasn't been the same as that. Why do you think that is? Or do you think that's okay? Or is it just all relative?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think the metal, first of all, I think for the diamond industry, it is just such a big deal. Like, this is, I think one thing people have to think about is when they're thinking about, people want to say, well, we didn't make a big deal when this happened in this country, this happened in this country. And it's like, that's true, but this is 30% of the world's supply. This is not an insignificant amount. Here I am with these lighting problems again. This is 30% of the world's supply. This is not, 3 million carats coming out of one country. This is massive, and it's going to have a massive long-term effect on the industry. And that's something else people need to think about. This is like COVID. It's not going to be over in a year. It's not going to be over in 6 months. It's not going to be over in a year. It's not going to be over in 18 months. Yeah. This is a long-term issue we're going to have to live with now.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to bring up COVID, but it's just a good analogy.
Yeah.
I think that gold supply chain, is more convoluted. And I think it's harder for people to kind of wrap their brains around. Whereas when it's like De Beers Alrosa, they can be like, well, I don't take goods from Alrosa anymore. Okay, like I'll work on that. But it seems like a lot more complicated. There's a lot more players and it's going through a lot more channels and
Mhm.
it's not maybe as traceable. And again, please correct this if this is not right, but it's not maybe as traceable and people in general just don't focus on this gold came from Peru, this gold came from Russia. That's not a discussion I feel like has been happening in the metal space, but it's a discussion that's been happening in diamonds for a long time. You know, look at Tiffany. I mean, and that's like Tiffany is a model that a lot of people, they're a major player, they're a leader.
Yeah.
Whether you like them or not, they're a leader in the jewelry industry. And they've been, you know, I don't know what they did now, but they had been putting country of origin on all their diamonds. This is Canadian, this is Russian. You don't see that with gold. I mean, even with a company like Tiffany that wants to literally put a country name in the case with their diamonds, all the diamonds over a certain size. You never hear that discussion from gold. Oh, I only want Peruvian gold. I only want Russian gold. And that's not, country of origin to me has never been a discussion on the consumer end with gold.
I totally agree. But do you think that that's something that will evolve into place? Just like, um, similarly to the diamonds and gemstones, like we're really, really concerned about where they're from. Do you think that it will evolve into that? Like, why are we ignoring what all of these stones are mounted in?
Well, I mean, that's a very fair question. I think that, you know, to me, I guess I wonder if gold will kind of go the way of coffee to an extent where
That's
it's
what
like,
I was thinking of, like,
it'll be
Brazilian
labeled
coffee.
Fairmined or fair trade. And that's what people look for. Like those people, when you go into, like, let's say you're like a Whole Food shopper. I'm sorry to make a non-UK reference, but
Oh, that's
you're a
awesome.
Whole Food shopper and you know, you're shopping there for a reason. And you go in and you go to the coffee aisle and you're like, I only buy fair trade beans.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I don't buy coffee, so actually it's a bad example for me to engage in. Coffee makes me nervous. I don't drink it. As you can see, I'm like overwrought enough.
No.
No coffee. But I wonder if it won't just become a label of being like a label Fairmined or fair trade, and that's enough for people. People won't have to say, I only want Fairmined gold from Peru. I
Right.
only want, but you know, they won't have
Right.
to, I don't know, is gold going to go to that level where people will be interested in what country it comes from? And is it traceable to that minute level? Or will people just be interested in kind of just give me an overview of the whole process? Was the whole process good? Fine, I'll take it.
Right, right. And like, some assortment of the UN sustainability goals are being addressed, and we have good, we know isn't child labor, there is, things like that.
We're mitigating our environment impact, our workers have a safe working condition,
Right.
and people would just say, okay, that's good enough for me. I don't need to know down to the menu. And, there's even this argument sometimes when I'm talking with retailers about country of origin, people even tell you, I don't know that my customers care so much what country it's from. They just want to know that it did good along the way and didn't harm anyone. They don't maybe need it not down to the minute level but we are getting to that, right? That's what De Beers is doing with Tracer, which is now being deployed at scale, that we're getting that point where they're going to be able to say, eventually De Beers says they're going to be able to say what country it came from. Do people on the consumer end need that much specificity? I don't know. Or do they kind of generally just want some kind of label of assurance that says this product did no harm?
Yeah. And I concur with you. I think also adding to that, like bolstering your point, is that a ruby from Greenland looks totally different than a ruby from Mozambique.
Correct.
And the origin has something to do with the quality or the qualities of the piece, right? Or of the material. Whereas I'm not a gold expert at all. And part of the reason why I love being involved in this is because I get to talk to super smart people like you. But I think gold is gold, right?
Yeah. That's a really good point too. Like if you're after diamonds of a certain size, you're going to have to go with a certain line. If you want a color, I want yellow diamonds. I want, pink diamonds, something like that, then you're going to have to, right. But right. Gold is gold.
Yeah.
That's interesting too. It also is what makes, I did this whole story on diamond exploration and diamond supply, like where we're headed with diamond supply in the next decade. Right. And someone was explaining to me why it's so expensive to look for diamonds, because when you find a deposit of diamonds, you have to do a lot of sampling to figure out exactly what you have. Whereas when you hit a vein of gold, it's a vein of gold. It's all gold. Gold is X $1,000 an ounce right now, and that's it. It's a very you're not getting different qualities of gold, whereas you're getting different qualities of diamond. But that's an excellent point about the diamonds and colored gemstones specifically.
Yeah.
Bracken just did a story that's going up today about this new cobalt blue spinel they found in Tanzania. And it's
Ooh.
gorgeous material and it's big. And
Uh-huh.
the other only deposit in the world producing something like this is in Vietnam, but that material is a lot smaller.
Oh,
It's
wow.
gorgeous.
Okay.
And they're not sure at this point how much. I mean, it could just be a very small little vein, right? But
Right.
it's beautiful material and
That article.
it's big. Yeah, it's really lovely.
So another part of the Fairmined gold and the various levels thereof that I didn't understand at first, and this was literally only 3 years ago that I understood that, you know, it's the artisanal miners, and I think here in Britain they say like artisan, like I don't know, they pronounce it differently, but it's basically like not the big companies, like
Right.
you know, because somebody said to me, "Oh my God, all our gold has, you know, mercury in it," and I'm like, no. Now I know that is not true, but it is at this artisanal, like an I want to use a different word because I feel like people don't know what it means, because it kind of sounds like artistic, you know what I mean? But it's really like single miners or small families that aren't even aligned with other miners that are just trying to get gold, trying to feed their children, and
Right.
they're using methods that are very, very bad for their own families, but it's
For the
survival,
environment,
for the environment, and
which also then in turn affects them, infects other families downstream. It gets in the water, the birds carry it, it affects wildlife. I mean, it's just, that's, like I was saying earlier, everything's connected.
yeah,
Like we're all suffering from the natural world suffering.
yeah. And I did not know, I don't know many of the stats and facts and figures off the top of my head when it comes to gold and what's happening with the artisanal miners and what percentages. But one thing I know from the top of my head was a quote from the UN that said, with regard to mercury. Now, Fairmined ecological gold, certified ecological gold is yet another layer up from just Fairmined gold, which is 100% mercury free. Now, that are these small scale families or individual miners, artisanal miners, 30% of the world's mercury emissions come from them. It's
Yeah.
the largest. And I was like, wait, I mean, okay, there's 15 million of them. I think that's the number. Don't quote me, but like, that's huge. You know, so when you think, oh no, but the big guys got it covered, they're doing it well, they're capturing the effluent, and then we're all environmentally safe, but there's still like nearly a third of the emissions are coming from this. My point is, like, there's such a big impact, a positive one, to be had if we can create more demand for these small miners to learn these other techniques,
Right.
and know that people want them.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, everyone's connected, right? Like they're having a better method of mining without taking away their livelihood and just saying, well, you're not doing this right and it's destructive, so you're just not going to mine anymore. And this big company is going to come in and do it, and just taking away their livelihood. Can't do that. But getting them off the mercury, and this is when I mentioned earlier the mercury-free mining challenge. That's what they're trying to do. Like find out ways to, I mean, the words we use at mercury-free are scalable, like something that's effective and scalable, and something we could give to artisanal miners that allows them to do their jobs without mercury, because it's better for them and it's better for the environment, which is then in the long term better for, like, everyone. Like, this is what people need to understand. This affects everyone. When mercury gets into the water, mercury gets into the soil, it has an impact on everyone. If there's something we can do in the jewelry industry to help make the planet like a little bit of a cleaner place, I 1000% don't understand why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the planet needs everybody's help right now.
With this challenge, I'm really excited to see how things turn out. Like I'm really genuinely excited to see which companies and which businesses and what size they are that decide to do this, because I've been trying to wrap my arms around the metal thing, and largely because of my affiliation with Bob Donofrio and my just absolute passion and support for what he's achieved, and long may he continue. But I've been educating myself, so I'm going to these lectures and symposiums, and in Vicenza at the beginning of the year, I saw, the Platinum Guild, Legor, which is a large gold company, C. Hafner. There was another one. Oh, there's someone, aren't you moderating something later today?
Dana Brofman.
Yeah, and David Zeminski.
David Zeminski from United Precious Metals Refiner, and Laura Galvis.
There you go. There you go. So I'm tuning in because, again, my education ever continues, and really we all should approach it that way. Just because we don't know really about it or how we can help, just like questions, ask questions. Nobody's.
Yeah. And like, don't Google it. I mean, this is just my own selfish desire as somebody that puts out educational content, but like, don't Google on the internet and look for 1,000 answers. Ask somebody who knows, somebody like Dave, somebody like Dana, somebody like Laura, people that do this every day and are well-versed on the issue. Like Dave literally runs a refinery. Like if you have a question about gold supply, gold prices, how it comes in, how it goes out, Dave knows the answers to this. Dana has dedicated her entire design career. I remember Dana when she was an FGI Rising Star. I think I remember Dana in the new designer gallery at JA.
Oh, wow.
But this has been her, and this isn't something Dana's just jumped on board with. And this is literally what Dana's built her entire career around. So ask her, like, she's a designer. If you're a designer and you want to know, ask Dana how she does it. How does she price things? How does she source things? How does she market it?
But you know what I'm always doing, trying to triangulate, like, not the haves and the have-nots, but more like, part of why I was talking to these large businesses is because I'm like, wouldn't you like to help those little guys? And wouldn't that say something about who you are? Because nobody wants to do a business because they want to give cash for something. Like, that's not the only reason. There's too much choice. This is the most fragmented industry. I don't know. I challenge us to find a more highly fragmented industry. Like, there's 4,000, people exhibiting. You want to know that there's like more of a soul and there's an alignment between your morals and values and that of the company you're giving your cash to, right?
Yeah.
Just like we've been talking about this whole time. So,
and that trickles down through the whole supply chain. Like, retailers want to know it with the designers and manufacturers and brands they're connecting with it. And then consumers want to feel it on this end. Like, that's how a lot of consumers now are like, and it's not everyone, and it never will be everyone, but that's how a lot of consumers are picking their brands they're loyal to. Yeah. Like, what is their message? What is their ethos? Is it equality? Is it environmental justice? Whatever moves you.
My daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, wanted to buy a new jacket. And I said, send me some links and let's take a look. And she found one. She was like, this one's perfect. It's fantastic. It's from Boohoo. And this was like, I don't know, sometime last year, there was all this.
Wait, how old is your daughter again?
16.
What's Boohoo?
So it's a business here. Again, it's in fashion, not my area of expertise. I'm diamond gemstone jewelry, right? But it's in fashion, and their parent company, was blowing up the news with bad, human rights, workers, environments, like all this sort of stuff. And I wrote her back and I shared a link and I said, this is the company. The jacket is so super cute. And I think that color and fabric is going to be perfect with the dress. This is the company. Do you still want to buy it? I was in the bath, I was like, she was in her bedroom. So she wrote me back and she was like, I'm looking for another one. And she didn't want to buy it.
She's Gen Z, right?
I believe she's Gen Z. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, she's Gen Z.
I think Gen Z are probably like now in their early 20s to like maybe 13 years old. I don't know what the generation after Z is coming, but this is that's another really good point, Elle. And you know this more intimately because you have 4, right? Wow. I don't know how you do it. I have 1 cat and I'm like totally overwhelmed with trying to like get myself and the cat sorted.
What an amazing husband. That's how I do it.
Yeah. Well, that's a rare bird.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that this is another thing that is Warren's making a point here is that, people always talked about the millennials being more diverse generation. They're more worried about social justice and what their brands represent socially. I think that only goes up another level when you're talking about Gen Z. I think the generation after them are the ones more acutely feeling the climate crisis. And they're, again, another step higher of diversity than the millennials. What do we call them? Gen Y, right?
Yes.
X, Y, the millennials, Gen Y. Gen Z is like even more diverse. So they're even more aware of issues around equity. And you have to look at Greta Thunberg is definitely a Gen Zer. And I mean, she kind of represents the voice of a whole generation. The Gen Zers are speaking up. They're speaking out. I mean, they're the ones did the climate strike at school.
Yeah.
And I think that happened all over the world. They're speaking up about gun control, like they're getting activated.
I was talking to these huge companies, right? And I'm like, why don't you guys who have a budget for your, corporate social responsibility, ESG, whatever, age you're like, in order to be helpful. So why wouldn't you pass like a baton down to the artisanal miners in terms of funding education, toolkits, et cetera, to move in this positive direction? Wouldn't that be, look, even if you don't give a damn, wouldn't that be great PR? They're not your competition in the end of the day, but it's another source and you're helping them improve. I just thought that made sense. And I'm like, why? Who am I? I come in at the 11th hour of this, huge thing, but just trying to educate myself. I'm like, why wouldn't some big company do something? The amount of impact $1 can have, you know what I mean? Why wouldn't they help? I talked to them about it, and I won't name any names. But one person did say to me, like, well, they should get other jobs. I think that's the only way to help them. They should get other jobs.
But I mean, people don't live in environments like New York City or like London where it's like, oh, well, I lost my job at National Jeweler. I'll go out and apply for 30 other jobs. I'll get on Indeed at night and look for another job.
And Google it because I have a computer sitting in my lit house with running water.
Right.
And another person
and internet access 24/7 with no question.
And another person said, there are, don't get me wrong, there were also like, that's something worth exploring. Obviously, it's the conundrum, right? I am not a wonderful, I don't know, I'm not like the dairies or something. Like my life's work is not this, but I'm trying to weave it into my life's work so that there's positivity, and something really, really valuable that comes out of it. I always say it's heart pendants, not heart valves, right? So looking for those value points is super important. So I was just having these conversations and I was like, what wouldn't anybody put together something like that where these big and deep pocketed businesses could do something for them? And is it really that contrary to their business goals to do that? Do I sound stupid making the suggestion, Michelle?
No, but I think a lot of times like I think a lot of, and this is terrible to say, but it's true. I think a lot of what motivates these huge companies is greed, and it's return on shareholder investment and return on ROI, and just like their kind of their sole purpose is making money in the business and, tightening margins and just, it's nice to think that these big companies have like social justice in mind or environmental justice in mind, but I don't think that's always what their kind of motivating goal is. And look, it's capitalism. That's what the whole system is built on, like making money.
Commodity.
Making money, right. Making money, make money, make money, make money. That's what the whole thing is based on. It's not a knock on those companies specifically, it's the whole system.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the, this is kind of going beyond the scope of this conversation, but I think so much of the problems of the world are just like the core kind of issue there is greed.
And what's so, and to bring it back to the Fairmined challenge, like what's so just really enheartening is all the companies that have already signed up that are saying, okay, I'm going to explore this. I'm going to participate. You've made it fun. You've made it a win for me. I'm going to get featured, or I might win, and I may get some signal to noise for my business, which I would love to have. And I may learn about a better way to do something that feels better in terms of selecting my gold sources, hopefully that's one of the ramifications. And I can't wait to see the jewelry. I'm like,
Yeah.
excited.
Right. I mean, that's the fun part as the judge. Like I think about it all the time too. I'm like, oh, what am I going to see?
What's it going to be like? And I like consider myself, a good judge of, non-derivative talent and stuff like that. I was looking at all the
Yeah, I mean,
categories.
I think everybody in the panel has seen enough jewelry. Like you can say if some, I mean, at some point, at the very least, even if you're not an expert, like I'm not a bench jeweler, but you can say if something seems new or not, or you can say if something seems like something you've seen 1,000 times, because at this point, we've all seen a lot.
If you like that video, you're gonna love the next one. It's full of our expertise and tips on diamonds, gemstones, and jewelry, growing your top line revenue and business strategy. Just click on the link, subscribe, and hit the bell button so that you'll be notified of our next videos, and give us a like. Bye for now.